Good evening, everyone. I'm now calling to order the regular monthly meeting of the Burlington Electric Commission, held on Wednesday, the second Wednesday of the month at 5 p.m. here at 585 Pine Street. And today is December 10th, and the time is 5:01. Let the record reflect that a quorum is present. Hello, Commissioner Moody. And first order of business, Commissioners, you've received the agenda for today's meeting. Are there any proposed amendments? If there are no objections, the agenda will be adopted as presented. Next, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. So the minutes from our previous meeting, which was held on November 12th, have been distributed. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the third and fourth corky dots under the financial review, it's kind of confusing. It's year-to-date or below budget because of lower McNeil production, and then the next line is net power supply expenses, higher fuel costs from increased McNeil production. So it didn't make a lot of sense to me when I read that.
It's an Emily question right there. I didn't see her.
She'll be here, but
Can we come back to that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Okay.
not critical,
Sure.
but yeah, it'd be nice to have an answer to that.
Okay.
Because it's two opposite directions.
Right.
Do you want to hold off on approving the minutes until Emily's here?
Or,
Yeah, if she can answer it, then that was my only concern.
okay.
And,
is that your gentleman? Do you have any thoughts there?
I don't recall like what the context was.
Yeah, okay.
Emily is online. I don't know if she can hear us or if she might be able to answer.
Emily, did you?
Good evening.
Here she is.
Would you like us?
I
to
did not hear
Yeah, I can
Yes,
repeat
please,
the question.
the question.
Yeah, it's about the meeting minutes. So under the September 2025 financial review, the third bullet point, there's a comment about power supply revenues are below budget because of lower McNeil production. And then the fourth bullet point is net power supply expense, favorable variance, higher fuel costs from increased Neil production. So I just didn't understand, it sounded like they're contravening each other.
Got it. Yes, I can answer that. So the recs are delivered 6 months after they are created. So there's the renewable energy production occurs, and then there is a certification process that happens, and then the recs are created or minted, and then there's a trading deadline by which those recs must be sold, retired, or banked. And so there's a lag between the energy production and the recognition of the rec revenue if you're to sell those recs. So the third bullet point about rec revenue being lower because of decreased McNeil production, to expand on that, it would have said reduced McNeil production in prior periods.
Okay.
And then the fourth bullet, net power supply expense being positive, or I don't remember what it was, but anyway, the reference there to an increased McNeil production was in the current month.
Okay.
Does that help?
That helps a lot. Yeah. Thank you. So I don't know, do we amend these or what do you do?
It's totally up to you.
Yeah,
It's up to you guys.
I think we probably should amend them just to make sure that they're.
Yeah, that's
helpful
to me,
to
that's
people
clear.
reading,
Yeah, yeah, because it
What did
wasn't clear.
you-
Now it is.
What
So-
did you write down that you'd like?
Yeah,
added?
and see if you agree with this. What I have is for the third corky dot, in prior periods, basically credits sell than expected or from prior periods maybe.
Mhm.
And then the fourth corky dot, after the higher fuel costs from increased McNeil production in the current month. So maybe just add that.
Okay.
So that clearly shows prior periods, current month. And with that, yeah, I'm fine.
Thank you. Are there any other corrections to the minutes?
Have to make sure the motion reflects the correction.
Mhm.
and reread that, or just say the corrected minutes?
Yeah, I think to move with the correction as just
As
stated.
stated.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion to move with the correction as just stated?
I'll move to correct the minutes.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
And any discussion on the motion? Yes, Scott. Sorry, Commissioner Moody. We can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
No. Can't hear you. Headset. Plug back in. There we go. There we go.
Gee.
We can hear you.
It's okay. Move on. Move
I
on.
hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you sure?
Move
Okay.
on.
Well, now you're ready.
Okay. So no discussion on that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Moody? Okay. Any opposed? Motion passes with 4. Great, thank you, everybody. Okay, so let's move on to the next agenda topic, which is our public comment period, or public forum. I will now open the floor for public comment, and each speaker is asked to state their name and limit their remarks to 3 minutes if possible. And we have our first speaker here in the room. Please join us.
Thank you. I'm Nick Persampieri. I'm a Burlington resident and a Burlington electric ratepayer. I'd like to address briefly the Velerity Report, which is at the end of your agenda packet. And General Manager Springer is going to talk about it towards the end of the meeting. Valerity's scope of work included studying possible repowering of McNeil with other fuels and studying technologies that might be used to reduce McNeil's stacked greenhouse gas emissions. And the report concludes that carbon capture and wood pyrolysis are the 2 technologies they studied that are most promising for reducing emissions without having a significant impact on rates. I'd like to briefly make 4 points today. First, as I stated to you at the joint meeting you had last August with the TUC, I think it's imprudent to consider investing millions of dollars in improvements to McNeil before first conducting a comprehensive assessment of whether McNeil should continue to operate or whether we should find replacement sources for the power it supplies. And when I say look at alternatives, that assessment should look at not just installation of new technologies at the McNeil site, it should also look at contracting for power. And it should not necessarily be limited to renewable power. I mean, ideally, we would like to replace McNeil with hydropower, wind and solar and battery storage, but if that's not possible, we should also be looking at non-renewable sources such as the grid power mix, or even a contract for natural gas or nuclear power. A couple of representatives of a nonprofit met with the mayor a few weeks ago. General Manager Springer was there. They were with the Regulatory Assistance Project, who I think is pretty well known. And they indicated that that Burlington ought to be following industry standard best practices, and that those include doing all source procurements, which means when you issue a request for bidders to provide power to you, you not limit it to certain types of power. You look at all sources. My second point is that the report is flawed because it does not consider repowering the plant with natural gas. Again, burning natural gas is not ideal. It emits greenhouse gases, but it emits substantially lower amounts of greenhouse gases per unit of energy produced than the wood that's currently burned. The plant is equipped to burn natural gas now, and the Velerity Report talks about doing wood pyrolysis, which would generate a syngas, and then burning the syngas in a natural gas combined cycle plant. Well, if we're going to build a natural gas combined cycle plant, we might achieve more emission reductions by burning natural gas than the syngas from the pyrolysis. Again, it's not an ideal measure, but it may be better than what's proposed by Velerity in the interim, and it hasn't been studied. Third, I think the report cherry picks information and appears to be biased. What really caught my eye was the statement on page 18 that if Burlington were to buy wholesale market power to replace the power generated by McNeil, it would have an adverse financial impact on BED, spiking revenue requirements by 17%. They reached that conclusion by looking at data from 1 month, the month of January, and we all know that wholesale market prices spiked during the month of January. So I thought this was outrageous. Information from financial statements submitted to the McNeil joint owners show that it costs, in fiscal year 2025, there was a net cost of $96.42 per megawatt hour for power from McNeil. And BED's budget document states that wholesale New England prices for 2025 were forecast to be $55 per megawatt hour. So I think their analysis should have looked at least a whole year and not cherry-picked 1 month. Fourth and finally, what is proposed, the wood pyrolysis, is not a clean, low-carbon solution. The pyrolysis process emits air pollutants. It generates a syngas. The syngas must then be burned. That burning generates greenhouse gases and other pollutants. And the proposed pyrolysis does nothing to lessen the adverse impacts of the harvest for McNeil on our forests. And I think I'll end it there. I wanted to thank you, and I wanted to say that I was really hoping to stay for the whole meeting and hear General Manager Springer's remarks, but unfortunately I have to go to another meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comments. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Is there anybody else who'd like?
I was trying to get on. He was having trouble, so I know that he is trying to get on
Okay.
here.
Okay.
He might hop on in a second. I don't know if he wants to say anything.
Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Okay. Well, if he does, we can address that since there's technological issues. So, thank you for that. Okay. Next on the agenda is the monthly impact minute.
Great. It's going to be more like a 5-minute minute, but we're really grateful to have Caroline here with us. Caroline is a post-grad MBA fellow from the University of Vermont who's been working with us, among other things, on customer segmentation data. And given Commission had a good conversation over the last couple months about our customer satisfaction survey, we had a great meeting in here yesterday And I thought Caroline could present a very condensed version of some of that additional data for you that you might find of interest. So, welcome.
I'll preface that I won't talk too much about the specific data points because I am working on a final report that they would like to share. That should be wrapped up by the end of this week, early next week. But I'll talk about my time. I've just got a slide.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as Darren mentioned, I got my MBA from UVM this past August and had an opportunity to work with BED on a customer segmentation analysis, as well as Bill Ward over at DPI on the weatherization ordinance. So it's been a learning process and really exciting. And so when I started this project, the main questions, the kind of guiding research questions were, what are the customer segments of Burlington Electric Department customers? And then what are the characteristics of a customer segment that influence and change their decision-making? And so the past approach for BED had kind of been a one-size-fits-all, share all of the rebate offerings to all of the customers, which if you've got the time to discern what's relevant and applicable for you, that's great. But there are customers who just don't have the time, but there may be things that are super relevant to them. So the goal of the project is to help ultimately inform a strategic marketing and outreach plan to strengthen participation in net zero energy and these efficiency programs. And so we started having some conversations with BED staff and identified 4 commercial customer segments and 8 residential customer segments, and using some BED customer and as well as research data, and then mainly using the customer satisfaction survey that you all have heard about at a previous meeting. I was really able to dig into 2 of the commercial customer segments and 7 of the residential customer segments we identified. There are some gaps in the survey where not all of the customer segments are represented, and so we also saw some opportunities for next steps of improvements in the survey, opportunities to really dig into what will be super helpful for BED to connect with customer segments so that everyone is represented. And so I, over the last 14 weeks, have analyzed this data, and we have this large matrix with lots of statistics in it, and I created some graphs that really help show differences in how these customer segments get their information, where they're looking for their information, the demographics of who makes up these customer segments, where they are in the community, and then also talking about what rebates are specifically applicable or not applicable, and identifying some gaps in where customers could be reached a little bit better. So lots of room for growth and opportunity, and kind of the next hopeful step is to design and implement a targeted and systematic customer outreach plan. So that is kind of a very brief overview of what I spent my time doing. So thank you for letting me be here.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's exciting.
Thanks, Caroline. And we can share the report maybe when it's finalized
Yeah,
for your
that'd be great.
meeting as well.
Yes, definitely. Great. Next, we have the Commissioner's Corner. Reminder that this is time for any commissioners to make a comment or raise a question that they've been thinking about. Commissioners have anything for the Commissioner's Corner?
Well, nobody else will go. Just thank you for putting all that online. That's, on the SharePoint directory. So at some point I'll dig into all of that. So
You even printed it all.
catch up. Well, yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, I have it online, but it's like
Good.
I'm still old school. I like to read physical copies from time to time. So yes, there's a lot of good information in there. There's a lot of here's what the things I didn't know existed. So things like the Board of Electric Commissions and Memorandum of Understanding from way back in 2003, all the way up to a lot of other questions. I've read through a few of them. The facts, what a lot of the terminology, and as I was saying, bite of pizza over there. One of my best friends is Office Copilot 365. So it's a lot easier to get in there and try to ask a very specific pointed questions. And you get pretty good answers.
Good. Commissioner Moody, are you all set?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Think
you
you can?
can. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay. Great. Moving on, we have General Manager Springer's update.
I see that Pike is online, so if you want to offer additional public comment
Yes.
before we go.
Great. Is there any additional public comments that want to be made?
Thanks for asking, but no, I'm just listening.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, over to you.
Okay, so I'll be brief for the update here. We will discuss the Velerity Report later on as an agenda item. In terms of regulatory updates, we had a filing that was due last Friday on the district energy docket at the PUC. We've made filing there. And then we have due this Friday comments on the business process review RFP. We'll be making those as well. I wanted to mention that at Board of Finance on the 15th, so coming up next Monday, we're going to bring the second 5 years of the Relevate Hydro contract that you all approved for the first 5 years to hopefully have a total of 10. And we're finalizing conversations there as well. So we're hoping to actionalize the first 5 years as soon as we're able. And then the item will not go to City Council, the additional 5 years, until the 12th of January. So that additional 5 years wouldn't be signed off on until January at the earliest. We also are doing a couple of position updates, Board of Finance and City Council, Board of Finance on the 15th, one of which is to create a new PUC Counsel and Compliance Officer position as part of our efforts to improve our regulatory work. So that'll be up on the 15th and then again at City Council on the 12th. And then if that's approved, we'll look forward to posting for that position. Thank you, Chair, for being at our webinar with SunCommon about commercial solar. We had a hybrid webinar here in this room and online. Good participation from various commercial entities and nonprofits who are interested in learning about the changes in solar tax incentives and treatment under federal law. We've heard that there are a few project leads that came out of that conversation, so maybe we'll have some Burlington entities adding solar as a result of it. And the webinar recording is online on our YouTube site. I've included the link there. Feel free to share with anybody who might be interested. And I will leave it there for now. Glad to answer any questions.
I just wanted to note it was a great session. It was really helpful. Lots of great insights into policy navigation and what's applicable, when to apply, what things to think about. So I really thought it was incredibly useful and helpful to make sure that commercial, the navigation of the rebates and remaining opportunity was easy and understandable. That's great.
Absolutely. Yeah, please share the link if you know of anyone who's interested.
That's great.
I have a small question on the regulatory role. What is the level of that and who would they report into? Because you called it an officer.
Yeah, it's titled PUC Counsel and Compliance Officer. Position will report direct to me.
Okay.
And is partly going to provide capacity in addition to what we have now, and partly going to replace some capacity that we may have a loss of, as our current outside counsel, Bill Ellis, is going to be moving on to VEPSA at the beginning of the year. We're still a partner in VEPSA, so we'll still work with Bill, particularly on items where he's currently our counsel. He'll continue to represent us. But we're anticipating that he may have additional draw on his time from VEPSA, and we want to have some in-house capacity to support our work here as well. So it'll be kind of a mix of those two things, but net plus in terms of we expect to have more time dedicated to regulatory work.
Thanks. Any other questions for General Manager Springer? Okay. Great. Move on to the financials.
Good evening. These are the budget versus actual results for the month of October. So in October, we had a net income for the month of $32,000. That compares to the budgeted net loss of $940,000. So we had a positive variance of $972,000. Working our way down from the top, sales to customers were very slightly under budget by $64,000. Other revenues, mostly EEU reimbursements, also under budget by about $100,000. Not a rec delivery month, so no power supply revenues budgeted or received. Moving to expense, net power supply expense was favorable for the month by $729,000, so that's making up a good piece of that overall favorable variance for the month. We had significant savings in the fuel budget. We had budgeted to run McNeil some in October, but we ended up being offline for the entire month for our annual fall maintenance outage. So there's some fuel savings. Purchase power was, because of that, slightly over budget, but we were also helped out by a favorable variance in transmission of almost $350,000, most of that from our Velco transmission expense. Other O&M was also positive by $132,000. And then another significant item in non-operating income, we received an additional piece of reimbursement from FEMA for the replacement of the Winooski 1 dam bladder, and that's contributing to that favorable variance of $267,000 under other income and deductions. Questions on this before I go to the next page?
I have a question that's stemming also from the McNeil budget. So I'm assuming that 50% of everything we see there is it?
This is only our 50%.
Okay.
What you
and
see
that's
here.
all fully accounted for in all of our financial documents. Okay.
Right, right. The other 50% of McNeil cost is not recorded here
Okay.
in our financials.
And then how
It's recorded, but but separately.
and how is your financial leadership tied to McNeil's operations? Like, are you leading financial
Yes,
leadership? Okay.
yeah. BED is the managing owner, operating owner. That's what you're called, the operating owner. So yeah, purchasing,
So that's all
HR is the city of Burlington, right? Everything for the plant
So
is,
decisions are made.
yeah, everything for the plant is managed by BED as the operating owner, if that makes sense. So we have our AP team, pays McNeil's expenses, and then we allocate half of those to the joint owners, and then we bill the joint owners basically for their half of the costs. And we have an accountant. One of our accountants is kind of dedicated, not fully, but assigned primarily to the McNeil accounting transactions.
Are there ever challenges from the other parties on the costs that they're getting from McNeil?
Just to be clear,
Yeah,
we manage the day-to-day.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the decisions on the budget,
Yeah.
for example, are approved
done.
by the joint owners.
okay, join them.
Strategic initiatives. So the joint owners actually approved the budget
Okay.
at their meeting,
Okay.
our meeting, prior to it coming here, just to
Okay.
be clear. So,
Okay, so
Yeah.
there is input from the decisions,
Absolutely.
just physical operation and decision making. Okay.
right, that's right.
So I have a question on I think I should save it for the 26 budget review of McNeil on the revenue change for Rex. Or should I do it here?
Is that a
Since
later
it's-
agenda item?
It's a later agenda. Yeah,
Save it?
I think so.
I think so.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then moving to capital spending, October year to date, we are about 16% spent of the total fiscal year budget. Most of these just timing of various projects. Operating cash was 9.8 million in October. That's down significantly from budget and is down significantly from September. Reason being, our debt service on our general obligation bonds is due November 1st, but we always pay it at the end of October. So that was a big, we save that money up each month and set it aside. So it's reflected in the operating balance that's reported here, but a big piece of it got swept out to make that payment at the end of October. And we were also budgeting for the new, or this year's annual GO bond to be issued in September. It wasn't actually issued until first week of December. So budget of cash projection is off from kind of how cash is actually going. So the actual cash will bounce back by 3 million, not as of November 30, but as of December 31st. So that's the reason for the big change in the cash balance.
Sorry, the bond issued, so can you explain more about what the bond?
Yeah,
just for my
certainly.
knowledge?
So we have two kinds of debt financing that we have access to. The first kind is called general obligation bonds. Those are issued under the full faith and credit of the city of Burlington, under a city charter provision, which gives the city the authority to issue general obligation bonds, but there's a specific piece for us in the city charter that says up to 3 million a year may be issued for the purposes of the maintenance and improvement of the electric plant, essentially. Okay, so every year the city team puts together a general obligation offering, you know, if the voters approve a borrowing for streets or anything else, right, that will go in there. The schools usually have an allocation typically, and then we have a $3 million piece.
Okay, this is just strictly a timing issue.
That's right. Yep,
Okay.
with one
One
issuance. And then the second
Okay,
type of, I'm going to go a little bit farther.
sure.
Second type of debt financing that we have access to are what are called revenue bonds. Those are not backed by the full faith and credit of the city. They're backed only by BED's revenues. And so there's a special bond resolution that was passed in the 80s to fund the McNeil plant, to finance the McNeil plant. And then we've used that, the commission has amended that bond resolution multiple times to do additional borrowings. For example, we borrowed to purchase the Winooski 1 hydro facility in 2012, 2014 timeframe, for example. So we issued a revenue bond in early 2022, the first net zero energy revenue bond of 20 million.
Okay.
And then we're planning for a second tranche of that next spring.
Okay,
Okay.
no, that's clear, thank you.
Yeah, very welcome. And so then our Moody's metrics for the most recent 12 months ending October 2025, debt service coverage ratio is in good shape at 4.69, adjusted debt service coverage ratio at 1.19. Cash with the $10 million line of credit is 127 days and without 66. And if they're, well, happy to take questions as always. Also wanted to mention and give full credit to our financial analyst, Cheryl Mitchell, who has prepared these reports, typically retired last week after almost 39 years with Burlington Electric Department. So I want to acknowledge Cheryl's outstanding and amazing dedication. That said, it also presents a possible opportunity to change the format of this report.
Yeah, and I had some thoughts as I was
Yeah,
going through that.
so I
mean,
would just ask.
This is very, very, very detailed, and so
Right.
yeah, so it's essentially like just if I can do some input.
Absolutely.
Just net operating income, cash position, those kind of things, which I think maybe is a 1-page or 2-page summary, like an executive summary, might be something that would be more valuable rather than, because it takes a long time to go through all of this. This is the kind of thing you'd like as a addendum. So it's
Yeah.
like if somebody wants the gruesome details, but otherwise, other organizations I've done financial things with, it's really just a summary.
Yeah. The present format is, the accumulation of what past commissioners, past CFOs, have asked for or thought should be provided. But it's really up to you
Yeah.
about
let's-
what it looks like. So
Let's say not provided, but it's an appendix kind of item that maybe you don't have to see it every month.
yeah.
But definitely some kind of a summarized executive summary as well.
Yeah. So as we backfill that position and kind of train up a new person,
Okay.
I would welcome any thoughts or suggestions about, anything different that you would like to see or more summarized or different information. And we can continue to have that discussion over the next couple months. Just let me know.
Sounds great.
I'm just going to throw a little pushback as the old guard who is used to and appreciates this level of detail.
I think it just very grateful for the opening and opportunity. I
Yeah.
wonder if us commissioners can just collect our thoughts, and when it seems appropriate, we can. If there's a specific window where you're like, we're ready, we have someone new, we're thinking about that, just let us know, and maybe we can all share our insights and needs in the reporting structure.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for the strategic plan update. I love that. I wanted to make sure I notice.
Thank you.
And it's really helpful to have that year-to-date column too.
Great. You're
Yes,
welcome.
thank you.
Okay. All right. Great. Next, we have the McNeil 2026 budget.
Sure, I'll introduce myself. I'm Lincoln Sprague. I'm the Director of Generation Engineering and Maintenance at McNeil now, and I'll be presenting the memorandum that I included in the packet for this meeting.
All right, and I'm sitting here mostly to take the opportunity to introduce myself as the new Chief Forester, replace Betsy Lesnikowski. And just a little bit of a background, I've actually been with the department for 13 years. I had the privilege of being hired by the original Chief Forester, Bill Cropland, and then working with Betsy for those 13 years as well. So, prior to that, I spent 19 years as a consulting forester in the New England region.
What's your name?
Oh, Seth Clifford, sorry.
Thanks.
Most important information. Thank you.
We also have Michael Herron is online as well from McNeil, but is not feeling great today, I believe. So
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Yeah, I'm just a little under the weather, so I wish I could make it, but it's nice to meet you. I'm the new director of ops. I started in March, and yeah, appreciate you guys having me on.
Great. Thank you.
And the McNeil, I just have to say, the McNeil team was working deep into the evening last night, getting a gearbox replacement done so that we could be back online, which we were at 4:48 this morning. And as the commission may know, prices have been quite high on the New England grid. I just looked, they're 196 in real time. They might normally be, I think Nick was suggesting earlier, $55 at the time when they were forecast originally. Certainly that's not atypical for a period of time, but they've been high around the clock for really the past several weeks. So we appreciate the significant effort by the entire McNeil team into the evening last night.
Thank you. Great.
I'll start now with this, to introduce the budget, pretty much following this memo here, but I'll get it into the record. Provided with this memorandum is a draft of the 2026 calendar year budget for McNeil Station. This budget was approved by the joint owners on December 1st, and now it's presented here for approval by the Electric Commission. Included in the package is the capital budget versus actual figures for 2023, 2024, and this year, January through September. Also, a comparison of budget versus actual figures for operation, maintenance, and administration and general expenses for calendar years 23, 24, and this year, January through September. And the third item is the budget narrative, which I'll now provide. The two parts of this are to explain the expense budget and the capital budget. So first, the expense but the expense budget is $30,389,000 as compared to $30,173,000 for the previous year. This is an increase of $216,000. The increase can be attributed to vacancies filled for multiple staff positions, new requirements that have been imposed by insurers of McNeil Station, and increased fees for regular services such as rail cars, rail car maintenance, power transmission, and IT licenses, and increased rates also that we're seeing virtually for all contracted services, materials and services across the board. We're seeing increased rates, which I think most people are familiar with, just sort of as the environment we're working in right now. The second part of this, the capital budget for calendar year 26, is $3,096,000 as compared to last year of $2,360,000, an increase of $736,000. The primary reason for this increase in the capital budget is a major project, $620,000 for RSCR catalyst replacement. That's the system that removes nitrous oxide emissions from the exhaust of the plant. That project was originally budgeted and planned for this calendar year, but is delayed and will be performed in spring of 2026. So it's been shifted into this new budget being proposed, where it now coincides with several other significant capital projects that must happen. So that project being included with those has caused the increase that we see here. Happy, of course, to answer questions that I can now in this session, but also do not hesitate to contact me or through BED, with whatever means is appropriate, to answer any questions that you have about this.
And just if I can add just a little extra context too. So we were talking earlier about the, joint owners versus the BED budget. This is the joint owners budget. Just to be clear, this is the total budget of which we are accountable for half. A lot of great work to keep the expenses and the capital budget relatively level. Capital's up a little bit for the NOx catalyst. And you asked earlier, Commissioner Kenny, about RECs. We're aware there's uncertainty regarding kind of the future value of the RECs. I believe what you see here reflects the fact, as Emily was saying earlier, that on the calendar year basis, RECs are treated one way, but when we think about where they're actually accounted for, the third quarter of 2025 will be accounted for in the calendar year 26 McNeil budget. So this budget reflects some continued premium RECs and some lower value RECs assumptions, at least, because we don't know what's going to happen with the Connecticut process. And we're still kind of paying attention to that. The other piece that we mentioned at the joint owners meeting that I want to mention here as well is with the NOx catalyst replacement, we are aware that there may be a need to replace the heat sink. We did some cleaning. The heat sink's part of the NOx catalyst system, is original, I believe, to when we installed that in 2008 timeframe. Doesn't have a particular lifetime associated with it. Has become dirty, for lack of a better term, clogged. We did some cleaning of it in this last outage, some blasting to try to unclog. Had some benefit, but is not able to kind of fully address the issue. So we may seek to replace that. If so, we'll go to the joint owners with a request in February. We told them about that. That would increase the capital budget here, wouldn't increase the expense whatsoever. And we will update the commission on that as well. So just want to make you aware there's a possibility that we do more with that project than what's currently in the budget.
Is there a general idea of ballpark cost for that?
It's a little under $1 million, right, to replace the heatsink?
That's right.
Yeah.
And the benefit of it being to increase our capacity from a total of 5 megawatts from where we stand now at slightly reduced capacity up to our full rating, the margin being a 5 megawatt increase.
Okay. It's 17 years since.
It's a good period.
Yeah,
relatively.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks for letting me add that additional context.
The first one's related to revenue. How are we forecasting revenue? Is it simply market rate for power, or is there contracts, or how does that work when we're selling to ISO?
There's not contracts. This would be based on forward prices, I believe. So we'll be looking out, and Emily can correct me if I'm wrong, but we'd be looking out and forecasting based on what we know of the forward prices. the plant typically bids in the day ahead market, and then is able to get the revenue based on what the market prices are. So this is a forecast based on what's known now. It'll change. It changes in real time, day to day, and it'll change kind of month to month, year to year. But that's, I believe, what it's based on. Yeah.
But the basis is like an average number?
Right, you're looking at the calendar year
Yeah,
for the
full
forwards.
calendar year.
Yeah, so there'll be higher prices, obviously, in the wintertime, lower prices in the shoulder seasons. And we look at our own run time, because we try to run heavily, as the commission knows, in the wintertime and in the summertime, and we'll plan our outages for the shoulder seasons. Like Lincoln was just mentioning, we were out, in October, or Emily was mentioning as well, and we'll be out in, April is the next outage. So, we'll not be budgeting production for those times, so the forwards for those periods won't affect our pricing here as much. Yeah.
So I'm seeing a loss of 5.8 million, correct? And so I guess what I'm wondering is, how much of this is variable expense versus fixed expense? And how are we determining when the plant is running versus not running? Is it only when the cost of running it for a variable cost actually is lower than the market price, or how is that determined, I guess? And I'm wondering if the assumption is that the plant continues to run, is there actually value in potentially running it some of the time when it may be at a loss to offset fixed costs?
So generally, what you said, the first part, is generally correct. We definitely look to run for the time periods where the pricing is favorable. And then, depending on what happens with the rec treatment will impact kind of the timing for when we run. With premium recs, you might run more times of the year, or it might be favorable to run more times a year. With less premium recs, it might be a reduced runtime, which does mean that you'd be putting the fixed costs over a fewer number of megawatt hours, but you'd be producing megawatt hours when it's most beneficial. The McNeil net income, it's not really a statement per se, because there's some assumptions based in here that are noted. Right. Some of the footnotes around recs and other things, but the way we've always looked at it is two ways. One, it's a hedge for us against these higher price times, which would show up in a negative way in a different part of our budget. And then the second piece is that it's a part of our being exempted from a number of other higher cost state programs that we would otherwise be subject to if we're not 100% renewable. And the other piece, kind of a third piece there, kind of going a little bit to what Nick was talking about, in saying, oh, we'd prefer that you have hydro. And obviously we have hydro, we like hydro, we're bringing a hydro contract to the council, and we brought one here. We got almost no production from our hydro this summer, unfortunately. We had a very, very significant shortfall from Winooski 1, which just goes to the idea as well of not wanting all our eggs in any given basket. So McNeil provides some hedge value there. I think at our last joint owner meeting, if I'm remembering correctly, that the calendar year to date financials had the net income was not quite break even, but it was pretty close, certainly closer than it was in 24. So we had higher energy prices in 25 and a better kind of financial outlook for the plant. But then you have to take, okay, what's half of that outlook, and then look at the BED specific pieces. And that's how we look at it as an asset.
And does that come into a meeting at any point? So
we had a pretty detailed discussion on it maybe a year or so ago. We had presented some analysis in the context of our integrated resource plan for 2023, which Nick and Pike are litigants in at the PUC. And Nick gave us a heads up to our attorney that he'd be speaking here today, as he always does. And we appreciate that courtesy. But we had presented data to the PUC in that context. We also presented it here, that looked at a period of about a decade and looked at McNeil's costs and benefits to Burlington more broadly. And you can break it down different ways. Do you count property tax revenue from the joint owners to the city? That's not a ratepayer benefit, but that's a city benefit. Or do you not count that? Do you account for the standard offer exemption, the Rygate exemption, various treatment that we get benefit from that way? And what we showed at that time, again, I'm remembering top of my head, but I think this is correct, that there was a net benefit for the roughly a decade or so that we looked at of 7 to 14.7 million to Burlington ratepayers, or Burlingtonians generally, based on the kind of full pluses and minuses. That IRP remains in litigation from 2023, so we don't have kind of a PUC guidance relative to that. We're actually coming up on the need to begin work on a 2026 IRP. But that tends to be the context where we look at some of those things, is in the integrated resource planning, you know, and that context. And I may have shared that with you, and if I haven't, I'm happy to.
I would love to
Yeah.
look that over. That would be helpful.
I will.
Through your other question, I haven't done the math on this budget, but the Cal 2025 budget was about 40% fixed, 60% variable.
One more
Please,
question.
yeah, please, please.
This isn't directly about the budget, or I would direct it to you. It's our expenses. Can you probably, Darren, help me understand the capacity load obligation of BED to ISO New England? I wrote that down from the committee meeting, but I want to make sure I understand that. So I'd written, as a load serving entity, we have an obligation to make available capacity resources to meet peak capacity during peak hours. So
Right.
is that specific to us because we own McNeil, or
Not
how
at
does
all.
that work?
Not
Okay.
at all.
Okay.
No, as a distribution utility, regardless whether we own power plants or don't own power plants, we are required, as part of being part of the New England grid, to have not just energy, obviously, to serve our customers, either through the market or through contracts or a combination, and in our case, renewable credits to meet our own renewable obligations, and in some cases to sell. But we also have to have capacity. And so capacity is essentially the ability to produce energy, and different resources are rated differently. So if you have a nuclear plant or something like that, you might get a 90+% capacity factor. If you're a solar panel, you might have a 20% capacity factor, 15, based on the number of hours of a year that you're potentially going to be able to produce energy, whether you produce it or not. So like we have our gas turbine at the waterfront, that provides significant capacity value, revenue, even though we don't run it very often. And so McNeil does not induce a capacity obligation to BED. McNeil actually provides capacity that helps us meet that obligation.
And
if
how
that
is
makes
that
sense.
obligation calculated? Is it a certain amount of like megawatt hours we're required to?
It's
or
based on the
percentage?
peak load and the peak hour
Okay.
for ISO New England, and how much we're using during that one peak hour. So when we run the Defeat the Peak campaigns,
Yeah.
we ask people, hey, can you possibly turn down your AC a little bit, or not charge your vehicle, not use an appliance? It's because we're trying to lower our obligation for the following year for how
okay.
much we're going to be charged based on that. And it's very much a zero-sum game. And when you see utilities using battery storage and discharging that during peak, they're likewise trying to lower their, capacity obligation.
Okay.
Megawatts,
It is
not
what-
megawatt hours.
Right.
Right.
The,
Total
the
capacity.
capacity to
Right.
produce.
Total capacity.
Yeah.
Right.
So McNeil has a 50 megawatt plant that has, the ability to store fuel on site, dispatch and run, has a much higher capacity value than a solar or run-of-river hydro or a wind facility would. It's one of our better capacity resources.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank
Yep.
you.
I've shared with both new commissioners the data from 2024 that I'd shared previously with the other commissioners. So you have that on email as well.
Okay.
Any other, yeah, please, go on.
Okay, one last question, I swear. So given the increased expected loss on here, like, do we feel like there are no opportunities to reduce expenses, or like the joint owners? And how is that considered? Because I do think, depending on how the rec market goes, this could potentially be challenging even more as we get to further years.
Yeah, we definitely did some work towards reducing expenses and capital, and trying to keep those essentially level or close to level as we could, even with the increase in inflation and other costs. You're seeing a reflection here of some of the impact that would happen if we're not getting the premium recs, not necessarily the full impact. We'll grapple with that more as we get towards our FY27 budget. So we're sort of doing a McNeil budget every 6 months. We're doing the calendar year budget to serve the joint owners' needs, not really our needs. But then we're also doing our fiscal year budget, which will include 6 years of this calendar year and a budget here, or 6 months, sorry, of the calendar budget here and 6 months of the subsequent one. So when we look at the rec piece in particular and some of the different expense values, we'll be grappling with that more in the 27 budget as we start to prepare that. Because our 26 budget already has assumptions around that we're locked in. If that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. But I don't disagree generally that like if we're not able to garner premium recs, energy prices become even more material. If they're high, then great, and if they're lower, then you'll see the impact of that. And then anything we can do to reduce costs will certainly be to our benefit in that scenario.
Are there any other questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Moody, are you all set?
Yeah, I'm good.
Check in, you sure? Good.
Hmm?
Any more questions?
I don't think so. I promised it was my last one.
No,
I'm just kidding.
It's good question.
I think I have. I think that's it.
Okay. You have a motion? Yeah. Thank you very much for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Now I have a motion. Someone read the motion?
I'll read the motion. I move that the Burlington Electric Commission approves the 2026 McNeil budget as presented.
A second?
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? 4 aye, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, next,
I'm back.
Would you like to discuss the scorecard that you're?
I would, yes. So when I last spoke to the commission in executive session, it was a long-winded, quite a bit of what we had done. And we were asked to come back and bring a concise, detailed scorecard. And I intend to present that at the January meeting. That'll be covered under executive session because it'll contain elements that we do not want to publicly disclose. But before I get to January and we go into that executive session, I want to see if what I'm proposing to bring to you is going to answer the questions at the level that you would like to see. So in your, you received some preliminary scoring for this. I'm not going to discuss any of those elements. And I'm bringing the, let's see if I can scroll down just a little bit. I'm bringing this to you with an outline, and I can tell you why we might score something one direction or another. I also want to acknowledge that, Allie, I got your feedback just before this meeting.
Okay.
So I think
I sent it just before the meeting.
well, fair. So I think, what I would like to do is explain some of the metrics and the key indexes that I'm using to bring to you. And then we can have a little bit of a dialogue, whether it's here or before the January meeting. But the intention is to bring to the January meeting what the commissioners find valuable.
Great.
Okay. So this is a very concise drill down into the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, cybersecurity framework, right? So it's a lot of words, it's a lot of elements. I pulled out key headers of each of those. The NIST cybersecurity model has, the 5 key tenets: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. There's a little bit of overlap in what each of those elements ask. I'm not going to go through each of these line items, but I'm happy to answer questions on what any of these might mean, if there's any commentary.
you could talk about, in Recover, just the acronyms for RTO, RPO. I didn't.
Great question. And it's one that I use on every single job interview question when I'm interviewing someone. So recovery time objective and recovery point objective. And what those mean is how much data for each system are you comfortable losing? So that's your recovery point. Okay. For some systems, it's 24 hours, right? Or for some systems, it's 5 minutes. So that's the recovery point. And then the recovery time objective is how long it takes to recover that asset, right? And so what is inside the RTO and the RPO, and thank you for calling me out on not spelling that out, is does the team have a plan for getting the items that need to be recovered quickly prioritized, and does that match the backup strategy that we have for that asset, for example?
I can just restate. I sent a document maybe an hour or two before the meeting, but my preference is this is a little bit more detailed than I think I need. It would be great for like the appendix or the next step, just to show all of that in case there's a question. But I think what is most helpful to a commission or at the board level, since we aren't IT experts, is just that risk oversight piece. So in like written form of, and I sent a recommendation, it's a back and forth. It was to start a conversation, but really just to talk about what are the biggest risks, how is that changed quarter to quarter, and all of those key things that I highlighted. And I think that could be below, because, I can pick out if something's a red or shifts or changes, and then we can talk about it. But like this level of detail is more than I need.
Okay. And this is why I'm here now instead of January, because I expect this to be an iterative process, because the threat landscape is going to change dramatically quarter to quarter.
And I think that's what we need to know.
And that's what you need to know. And that's what I need to know. Right. So, and I'm happy to share all of this with you, because honestly, I get a little nerdy. Right. So, I hear what you're saying, and let me work on pulling a little more detail out. And if we find in January that, okay, Erica, you pulled out too much detail, then we can look forward to April and add some more detail.
Okay. And then will you respond to the recommendation, or how should we move forward on that in terms of what I sent over?
So I haven't had a chance to fully review it. So I would like to, respond to it in a more thoughtful manner than in the back of the room,
Okay.
So if you're okay with that.
Yeah. And I also mentioned in sending it to Darren that I think it's okay to even delay it a month, since I just sent it today. But I do think instead of having you do a bunch of work that's not helpful and rushing to have it by January, I'd prefer that we're getting that higher level, more risk assessment, language-based type of report. But I want to make sure the other commissioners agree.
I think that sounds really helpful. I think that would be a nice way to make sure we're focusing on the right things and getting enough attention and direction on what your strategic approach to it is. I like the scorecard. I mean, I don't want you to do extra work necessarily in terms of monthly, not a monthly report on this, but I think the landscape of seeing kind of all the different pieces and kind of where things are going is helpful. I don't think the commission needs to see it on a regular basis, but if it's something you're already tracking, and I think it's helpful for you when you're presenting out your whole, annual portfolio of how things are going, I think that's a nice piece to it, because it gives you that one-page summary of here's all the things we track and how we're doing on them.
And I think quarterly is probably the right cadence for that. And again, on this second page here, which again would be scored, and there's a version that has been scored. The top 3 exposures probably going to be, the top 2 are probably always going to be the same, right? Those are you have that information in front of you. The third one is sort of going to be a little bit of more of the threat landscape and the dynamic nature of that. And then the second page of this, which is not NIST, right? So this is BED's what we're paying attention to. And these targets are my targets and my expectations for the organization and for my team. Okay, so that might be more of what you are looking for specifically, Ally. Okay, this is what the team is focusing on, and these are the metrics that we're using to measure ourselves.
Commissioner Moody, do you have anything else you'd like? Any points or questions or thoughts?
Oh, I'm good. I was on the, I'm kind of feeling the same thing. I don't know if I need this level of detail, but I appreciate that hopefully by doing it, you've given yourself a level of detail that helps you out. But yeah, I think I agree. We're just more of an executive summary, and I just appreciate the department's attention to this. Thanks.
Okay. So I'm going to advocate that we do bring this.
Can I make a comment?
I'm
first?
sorry.
Just want to make a slightly different spin on this. I don't think anybody on the commission's an IT expert, but that's my assumption. I don't know. This is good. The real question is, this is the kind of thing I would see as an audit, is that you have people look at this over a period of time and say, an internal audit is fine for starting, and then an external audit potentially. We talked about this at the last commission meeting in terms of having that assurance that, hey, you've written down, I'm assuming what's in here, you've written down what you do for each of these. An audit just comes in and says, did you do what you said you did? Therefore, here's the results of that audit that said you are following this. These are your ways of controlling risk, which is what you're trying to do. I guess my question more is it for the commission's role to go and review this on a quarterly basis, or is it more of a business process for the commission to oversee and say, yes, you have a business process and you have the ability to see as a commission that this is a functioning process? Because as I've heard the comments, you don't want to get into the weeds on how many simulated phishing failures that you had within the company. I understand that. My old company, every company I used to work for, we did that. And you try to catch people phishing. So I understand what you're doing because that builds the knowledge within the company. But as a commission, I sort of question, I know I wasn't in the executive session, but I sort of question, is that really the commission's role to get into the weeds? Sounds like even from Ally, it's not necessary to get into the weeds, but I like that this exists, but what's the control process to make sure going forward that this is followed and then report back to the commission saying, yeah, we found some issues when we took a look at this area that maybe our process isn't the greatest, people aren't following it exactly as it was intended, that kind of thing. That's sort of my comment here.
Okay. Well, I would suggest that we stay on target for January. Let me take your feedback and let me bring the executive session, anticipated executive session, to go through all of, some of this at a high level, and let's consider it an iterative process, and we'll keep refining. But mostly I want to be able to bring to the commission the risks that we're paying attention to and what we're doing to respond to those.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Next on the agenda, Velerity Report.
Let me see if I can share my screen here effectively. There we go. I'm not going to run through the entire report. It's not our report to run through. But if you're interested, Brad ran through it and answered questions at the TUC meeting on November 25th, and the recording is available, Town Meeting TV. So I encourage any commissioners who are interested. I know Commissioner Kenny was with us and got to hear the discussion, but if you missed it and you want to listen in on their presentation of it and the questions, please do. I'm going to try to just highlight a few key pieces for us as the Burlington Electric Department that we're taking away from it and that we found value in. And just as a reminder, kind of where this started out, this was the council resolution in 2023, the district energy resolution. And this was called for in part by some who were skeptical about McNeil and about the path that we're on and wanting a third party, an independent third party to come in and look at this. So this was a completely atypical and unusual process. We had to bring the scope of work for the RFP itself and the scope of work and vendor selection each time through the commission, the TUC, and the council for approval. And it was approved at every step, I believe, in all cases unanimously, as I recall, or close to unanimous, if not unanimous. And this is the work product that came from that resolution. Velerity is a company we didn't know going into it. We appreciate working with them. Our team has not reviewed every piece of data or assumption in this report, so it's their report and we're learning from it as opposed to our report. But one of the key things that's mentioned here on this slide and that I completely agree with, and that was, I think, contained within pieces of the resolution, they were looking at options here where we want to stay 100% renewable, which we do, and which state law is trying to get every utility to be 100% renewable. So we're not talking about nuclear and natural gas. I know that it came up in Nick's comments, but those are not things we're looking at. And then maintaining, good rates, particularly with an eye towards customers who may be least able to afford it. And that's language that was in the resolution as well, was keeping an eye on rates and affordability for customers. So there's some data here where they characterized McNeil's stack emissions. I'll just mention that they used what they were saying was an average of a 5-year period to come up with a kind of baseline. And then as you can see here, they looked at, okay, where were you in the last year that you had full year data for, and then how much would you need to cut from this to achieve the baseline. There were some comments about that at the TUC meeting. I won't spend much time on it. What I'm most interested in talking about are the initiatives that they characterized. So they looked at these 12 different initiatives, some of which are alternative fuels, some of which are improvements in efficiency, some of which are much more kind of dramatic investments, all of which were aimed at the idea of, can we reduce stack emissions at McNeil? So some of us believe you look at McNeil or any kind of wood-fired unit, and you would say that the emissions should be categorized on a life cycle basis. Some people argue that we only need to look at the stack. We kind of don't have to have that argument. If we reduce it to stack, great. We're going to have a better environmental footprint for the plant, both on a life cycle basis and on a stack basis. And so they were looking at it with that in mind. They put it through a screen, as they noted here on this slide. And I'll actually jump to this next slide, which I find to be kind of maybe the most helpful. So on the axes here, we're looking at tons of stack emission reduction at the bottom. And then we're looking at rate impacts as they calculated them on the left side. So you can see ammonia blending and RNG blending get you a significant amount of stack emissions reduction at a very high cost that I don't think any ratepayer would want to bear. Those were dismissed by Velerity because of that reason. Lower levels of RNG and ammonia blending achieve less emissions reduction at less rate impact, as you might expect. A wood chip dryer, they looked at that. We've looked at that with Mid-South Engineering. And in all cases, we've come up with the idea that it's not going to achieve a significant amount of efficiency. That the wood chips we're using, and Seth's here, he'd probably speak to it better than I could, but the wood chips we're using are generally reasonably dry. 75% coming by rail. They're losing moisture during that process. In some cases, we're putting them out in the yard. They're losing moisture in some cases. There wasn't a huge delta of benefit to gain by putting in a wood chip dryer. On the flip side, it's a significant capital cost. So that was something that was called for review. We've looked at it. It does not appear to be a really compelling option. ORC is organic Rankine cycle turbine. This is, as I understand it, capturing waste heat at a relatively low temperature, using it for additional generation, making the overall facility more efficient. They have ORC 1 and 2, which are two different temperature levels that they looked at for the waste heat. One of them gets to an emission reduction level that at least is tangible. There was some discussion about kind of the feasibility of it. It's something that I think merits some additional review on our part. And the cost benefit there was at least reasonable. And then the other two options, which were here, and you can see on the right-hand side, achieve a significant potential stack emissions benefit at a relatively low or no, in some cases, net cost, depending on, and again, this is high level, so we have to take it with that in mind. Carbon capture and wood pyrolysis. So let me jump to where they categorize these different options. And let me actually pull this up here for carbon capture. So when you read the Velerity Report, you're looking at these two different columns here. The 25% level and the 50% level are amounts of stack emissions reductions they were calculating on these different technologies. So carbon capture, they categorized in two different ways based on these two different emission reduction levels. The CapEx number here is based on an assumption of debt service coverage on a 20-year bond at roughly a 3.4% interest rate. Just to give you a sense of it. So where it says 518,678 in the top right.
What does that work out to as the capital investment?
Right. So that's going to be, 20 years of that debt service with that interest rate. So, roughly
12, 13 million.
Yeah. I mean, I think it might even be a little higher, but
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Now, OpEx is what additional operating costs we're going to see from the unit. And then the revenues here, which are reasonably compelling on the right-hand side, over 2 million in annual revenue, is based on the idea that you would sell the carbon, you'd capture it in a gaseous state, you would get it to a liquid state, you would sell it via a tanker truck, essentially, into the New England carbon reuse market, which is not something I'm deeply familiar with or that we've really looked into.
Carbon reuse market or
CO2?
CO2?
CO2, sorry,
Yeah.
CO2. So in situations where somebody was using CO2 for commercial
I used
purposes.
to run a plant where we use CO2.
Yeah, so you know
we brought the
exactly.
tankers in, yeah.
Not a market that we're in.
But it wasn't food grade, which is my concern.
Okay.
Is that I have a feeling this is going to be food grade, and that brings in FDA and all kinds of regulation you don't want to deal with.
Well, the big point here to know is that absent those revenues, this would have a rate impact that would look a lot different than what they've categorized.
And
so
yeah,
you're
so
assuming here.
I'm with you on this, that market is rather tenuous because just general CO2 for, and doing a tiny bit of research on it, most of it users wouldn't, the ratepayers wouldn't like is that it's going into more fossil fuel extraction.
Yeah, that wouldn't
That's
be
the
a
general
purpose that
use.
we would probably be excited about.
But that's why I say I think there's a very skinny, narrow thing, and I'm kind of concerned about it.
So that is one of the key questions that we would have around this is what are those revenues? How reliable would they be? What are the purposes? So that's
so if you took that
key
out,
piece.
did you do a calculation as to what that would be on the ratepayer basis? If you
We
made
did
the
not,
revenues?
and we don't even have the model that they used, so we don't. I couldn't.
Well, but they have a revenue number. I just
They
didn't
do.
know what that would be.
I think it would be safe to say it would be wildly uncompelling without the revenue.
Okay, okay.
Because you'd be adding a lot of capital cost and not getting any offsetting revenue or
It's
savings.
high risk to me. That's a high risk revenue.
So kind of relative to that conversation, we also have the wood pyrolysis opportunity that they talked about. So here, again, as I understand it, you're talking about taking wood chips like we get today, putting them into a chamber and superheating them in an oxygen-free environment, non-combustion process initially, getting a biochar, a concentrated biochar, which is a concentrated carbon byproduct that can be sold. There's some revenue available from that, can be reused for agriculture, may have some life cycle carbon benefit associated with that. And then the remaining portion, as I think Nick Persampieri was talking about, is a syngas that you would be able to use in a combined cycle turbine. And at the stack, it would look, as far as I know, very similar to what renewable gas or natural gas might look like. And of course,
well, can I make a point on that?
Please. This is based on their presentation.
Syngas is hydrogen and carbon monoxide. The two very nasty things that we don't deal with today. Hydrogen, if you look at it cross-eyed, will explode. Carbon monoxide will kill people if you leak it. So those are two things I would definitely suggest asking them those questions about that.
Fair point.
That's what syngas is.
Yeah, well, fair point.
Yeah.
So then they were suggesting you use that in a combined cycle turbine, you produce electricity from that. It would be a very different process than we produce electricity today. Yeah. On the plus side, in addition to the biochar, the estimates are you could be 60+% efficient with that process. So what you'll see here that you don't really have in the carbon capture analysis is a significant reduction in wood fuel cost is assumed. in the parenthetical there with the roughly 6 million in savings that then essentially covers in their kind of modeling here, the CapEx, which was modeled at about 40 million roughly for the 20 years, and then the additional kind of costs associated with running this. They came out net negative. I mean, I'd be surprised if we had a scenario like that. That'd be interesting. But either way, the idea being, could you use less wood fuel? Could you get less emissions? You know, how do you handle the syngas? Great question. I don't know kind of where that leads.
One comment. I mean, again, like I said, doing very tiny research. I guess
Yeah.
there's a plant in Berlin, New Hampshire, that does this today.
Is that right?
Yeah. So it gets into the bigger question of what the follow-ups are, but there is a potential place to get a real sense of how they actually do it.
And there's a proposal as well for a 2.2 megawatt facility in Lindenville in Vermont.
Oh, okay.
From a company who has a
Yeah.
process that they use. I think their only plants currently are in Europe, but
Okay.
this would be the first one in the U.S.
But they have a history of building and running
In
these
Europe.
facilities.
Yeah.
Which is, again, another big concern is
Absolutely.
this is a chemical plant.
Right.
And there aren't any chemical plants that I have any substantial size in Burlington. And just thinking about it, I was like, I don't know how many chemical engineers are in Burlington. I'm one, but I don't know how many more there are out there.
I do think it's interesting to look at the either demonstration, if they're just piloting it, or the actual running plants in Europe, just to see how it's,
Well, I'd say Berlin came up as one. Berlin, New Hampshire, they actually are doing
Yeah.
this from wood chips. So.
And just to be clear, what they looked at here was running this type of facility alongside the main McNeil facility. So as you can see in the top left, they're assuming continued consumption of certain amount of wood by McNeil proper at a stack emission, level that's consistent with today. And you can see the stack emissions assumed there, and then the pyrolysis producing a significant amount of energy, and then doing so at a lesser carbon intensity and producing less stack emissions and getting you the benefits there. So essentially, the remainder of this analysis, which I'm not actually going to go into in greater detail, was around what types of things they would propose if McNeil was not available and you still want to be 100% renewable. I'll just skip right to the kind of summary. They get into some of the economics. Nick mentioned some of the economics and rate impacts, different things. What they basically said at the end here that you would do, in their view, would be wood pyrolysis as a replacement with utility scale energy storage and some additional distributed energy. Would be one way to replace what McNeil provides Burlington today, not what it provides the state. This is just our share.
Okay.
And then the second one being some sort of additional hydropower contract. We talked about some of the risks of further loading our portfolio with hydro, but some sort of hydro contract plus again utility scale battery storage at 5 megawatts, and then they're saying 9+ megawatts of distributed energy. That would be approximately like a doubling of the amount of solar that we have in our portfolio as one kind of estimate.
Was the hydro coming from Vermont or coming?
They didn't say.
Okay.
They would just say,
Okay.
some sort of hydro. Those were their scenarios. But, to me, the bigger takeaway was around those initiatives. So just getting to, and I'll stop sharing here. Getting to kind of next steps, as you were just indicating, what we would like to do is issue an RFI, request for information, perhaps later this month, and seek additional vendor level information as opposed to high level, from our consultant, but vendor level information from anyone who'd be interested on the organic Rankine cycle, on the wood pyrolysis, and on the carbon capture, and get more granular information on the costs, the technical specs, the pluses and minuses. And that's a no cost thing to do, and it doesn't hurt us in any way. It just gives us more information to draw from. We know right now we're in joint ownership. I'm not clear that the joint owners would have an appetite for making these types of investments. We've had negotiations, obviously, around having potentially a sole ownership at some point for Burlington. So we would be investigating this with the idea that this would be for information to further our efforts if we did end up in sole ownership of what we might do to improve the efficiency or the environmental profile of the facility and the site while still being reliable, still providing ratepayer benefits. So wanted to see what the commission's thoughts were on that, but that was our kind of thought on the next step is let's get some more granular and vendor and installer designer level information so we can begin to characterize these three relatively interesting options in a way that gives us more detail. And I'll stop there.
I think that sounds like a great next step. I think it'll help represent some of Commissioner Williams' concerns and start to vet it out in a more intentional way with what organizations or solutions that the market would propose. So
yep.
I think that's interesting.
And given my background, risk is the key thing. I think
Sure.
if you can include that in the RFI,
yeah,
is what do those vendors see as the main risk points, and what sort of risks do they put on?
I'm
Not
gonna
higher
write-
than, not less than.
Make sure that's written in.
Yeah, would be
I
good,
agree.
because that'll be able to blend. Because right now, yeah, it's just high concept, but
It is.
yeah, it's good.
Well, to complement the risk, I would say if there's any evidence of like where they're in the nascency and market transformation cycle, so that we can understand if they truly
Right.
see it as a pilot and early adoption, or is
Yeah.
it where they can bring those European case studies to bear. And say,
Right. I think we have some language in there around kind of other examples where they're operating, data that we
Yeah.
would want on that.
Yeah.
So I agree. We want to get market information. We don't want pie in the sky concepts. We want things that have actually worked and could be replicated. We don't want to be the first to
Yeah,
do something that no one else has ever done anywhere in the world. We'd like to know that it's worked somewhere. Yeah. Agreed.
Is there a cost to putting out the RPI?
No cost.
RFI rather? RFI, okay.
No cost. We would put it up on our website. We'd give vendors, probably 3 months to respond to us. If there were questions, we would respond to those in a public way so everybody had the benefit of that information. And other than limited amount of staff time, very limited, frankly, no cost and potentially lots of upside.
I just second what everyone else said on the commission. And I think this is really helpful. And my question is kind of per the end, it seems somewhat not unanimous, but that utility scale battery storage is part of the path forward. Is there a way to accelerate that work here at BED? I know there's the test runs and there's a little bit of small battery storage, but it seems to me that's the future. I listen to the
Yeah.
Volts podcast when I really want to get nerdy, and it just seems like costs are going down and it's a path forward. So can you just mention that?
We have a couple things already in the works. So we did an RFP for 5 megawatt battery, similar to kind of what they were talking about in the study previously, and we got updated pricing over the summer. And we are kind of deeper into the RFP process there, where we had multiple vendors respond and we're evaluating different responses. We prioritize getting the hydro contract done because our first light expires at the end of this year, our current hydro contract. So we want to get that replaced first. But as we enter the new year, we're going to be prioritizing battery storage RFP. And we have also the Sheffield contract, which you all gave us the authority to renew for up to 5 years. And that expires, I believe, in October of 2026. So we'll be prioritizing those two items. We have an agreement with the joint owners that allows us to locate up to 5 megawatts of battery storage at the McNeil site already. And then they can join us in participating or not, up to them, and we can negotiate there. So if we have an economical proposal out of that RFP, our goal would be to advance it for approval in the early part of next year, and then work with the joint owners to see. And in fact, I believe I mentioned at the last joint owners meeting, for them to consider if they're interested in joining us on it, or if they would like us just to proceed on our own. We would provide some sort of, lease payment for the use of half of the, their half of the value of that land that we'd be using, but would be relatively cost effective, I think. So our goal is to advance a 5 megawatt battery proposal in 2026, which would be by far the biggest we've ever had in Burlington. We've never done anything on that scale.
Yeah, if I can ask technology-wise, I haven't listened to the podcast, but I know there's multiple streams going on battery technology. Do we have anything forward-looking, say, what it'll look like 5 to 10 years down the road in terms of battery storage, any kind of general idea on that? Because today's and the 5 megawatts going to cost what it will cost today.
Yep.
But are there things like solid state and so forth that might change the game going into the future? Have we
Yeah.
looked at that at all?
Solid state would be really interesting, not only for stationary, but for vehicles too. So,
Yeah.
we definitely would keep an eye on that. We're a bit of a late mover on the batteries relatively in Vermont, and by design, because we haven't had the need to use them for reliability specifically. So the value for us is really going to be in the reduction in what we were talking about earlier relative to the capacity needs. We'll be discharging them when we have them during peaks, both monthly and annual, to try to reduce our share of transmission costs, share of capacity costs. So, an investment in that one battery certainly wouldn't preclude making another investment
So
in
it's learning
better
how to connect
battery.
it, use it.
Yeah, we'll get good
how to
experience
play the
with
market
dispatch
with it
and. So I view it as a real net positive if we're able to do it, but then certainly it's not one and done.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
is that I think there's a separate stream that's a longer term. Okay, what
Yeah.
does the future of batteries really
Yeah,
look like?
I
And you
mean-
say we're late to the game, so that sounds like one that would be worth exploring going forward.
Yeah. No, we'll definitely be interested, but that would be good. It'd be a good asset to have and good to dispatch and start to be in that, what is really a zero sum game, unfortunately, around shifting costs between states and between utilities who have batteries or those who don't. So we want to be one of the utilities that has some of that asset.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions from the commission?
Well, I appreciate the feedback. We don't need to bring the RFI, forward for approval. It's something we can do on a regular kind of business basis. We'll work on it. We'll take your thoughts.
Well, let me ask the question. What are the next steps? I haven't watched the video. What are the next steps with the TEUC?
I think they had the potential of having some follow-up questions, and I promised to share those if they provided them to us with the consultant. The consultant has ended their engagement with us, so if they answer any additional questions, it would probably be in their good grace and not because we're paying them more to do that. They've reached the end of their contract. They did answer a number of questions at the TUC meeting. I think there's probably some limit to the additional value we can get from them at the high level. I think there's probably more value for us going out to the market a little bit.
So they didn't have any particular asks or anything?
No, other than, there's interest in more discussion and there's interest in potentially some follow-up questions. And if we do pursue the RFI, we'll certainly let the TUC know about that, the city council. And then, it would lead to some additional information that could lead to a more formal RFP, or it could lead us to follow up with individual
And
vendors.
that's when they come back in.
Yeah. So we would keep our governing bodies apprised as we learn more.
Just actually one question for clarity. There was concern about the January month that came up both in that meeting and here. But as far as I understand, they're just comparing a January to January. And so the revenue requirements are actually just month to month, not in total modeled off of January, correct? So
Now, Brad got asked about this at the TUC meeting, I believe, and
Yeah.
responded. And again, I didn't see their Excel sheet or their
But
data.
either way, it's just January to January, so it's not a problem from my perspective to have chosen January because they're not modeling an entire year off of January.
Yeah, I think the
in terms of
critique
revenue.
was that January would be a higher price time, and if they were basing the entire annual requirement off of January, then that would be problematic. If I recall correctly, and I don't want to paraphrase what Brad said, he was providing that as an example.
Right.
Not as the only thing that they looked at, but because this was a relatively independent review, unlike a consultant who was working directly with us, who we had full transparency into the data, we didn't have that here, so I can't speak to it in greater detail. But they did speak to it at the TUC meeting, certainly.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the feedback.
Appreciate it.
We'll work on an RFI, and if we are able to get something out, we'll let you know that we did by the January meeting, and then it'll be several months before we would have our responses, but we'll be able to keep you updated.
That's great. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. This is now the commissioner's check-in. Is there anything that folks want to bring up? Anything that's come to mind? Anything you haven't been able to ask?
Actually, I had one.
Yeah.
Since I was down in New Jersey, I snapped a quick photo as I was flying by on the train. It reminded me that they put solar panels on all of their telephone poles.
That's right. Yes.
Have we thought about, I'm guessing you did, but have you thought about doing that? And has there been a reason why we haven't done that?
I've seen that. I'm not clear on what the impetus was for it necessarily.
It was years ago, because I remember this
Yeah,
going up 15,
I have seen it
years
though.
ago.
No, I don't know that we've done any sort of study on like solar panels on streetlights. I know that when I've been there, I've tended to see them on more open roadways, and obviously some of our areas have more tree cover, potentially, which might make certain areas
Well,
less.
and I know that the
less
solar factor is
interesting.
not in Vermont's advantage anyway.
True.
But it
New
was
Jersey
just-
is a little bit better.
When I saw that, I just snapped the picture. I said, "Oh yeah."
No, it's an interesting idea. We've had we have some interest in using our own facilities for additional solar, and there's been efforts by the city to look at using the landfill potentially, as well as the water department roof. My understanding is you could have several megawatts potentially of.
Yeah, that's much better than putting on telephone poles.
So I do think the TUC was going to have an update at its December meeting on some of those projects, which could be of interest. But I've seen what you've seen. I don't know kind of what, if anything, anyone's ever looked at relative to that here.
I haven't. The guy who used to work for me, his wife works for PSE&G. I could ask.
Okay,
her.
yeah, I'd be curious.
New Jersey's had an extremely aggressive solar program
That's
for
why
over a decade.
yes,
They had a
put it-
very,
put it on telephone.
very
Not as much
high
these days, but
premium
they did.
SREC program. solar
Yeah.
program, yeah.
I'm very well aware of
Yeah.
that. I worked a project at my company.
So that could be
SREC driven.
Yeah, that could be.
That my CEO decided, well, we're not in the business of electric. And like, you're giving up $1 million on this.
The SRECs
You know
were,
that.
well, I mean, a premium rec in New England might be $40 a megawatt hour. I think
It was over
SRECs
100.
were,
It was
yeah,
over 100.
more than double.
Yeah.
So that would drive some development too,
It
I'm
does,
certain.
yes.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question on what you just mentioned with the landfill, and I don't think I'm clear on the two committees' actual role and responsibility as it comes to something like that. So
Mhm.
how does that break out? Is that city-owned land,
It
for
is.
example?
It is.
So that's why it would fall under.
And they tend to oversee, among the other departments, DPW, for example,
Right.
which manages that landfill facility. So when they did an RFP, I believe it was DPW and the city doing the RFP. We don't really come into that process, so we're very supportive of the idea. We would come in if and when there's a development plan, and they could say to us, okay, the installer is going to put in a megawatt or 2 megawatts of solar. They'd like to have a power purchase agreement with you. What would you pay for it? And then part of our payment would presumably be to pay a lease to the city for using the land. So there'd be some financial benefit to the city. You'd get productive reuse of the land, and we'd get power in Burlington, which we like to have power in Burlington at a reasonable cost, would be the kind of win-win scenario if we're able to do it. But we don't own the land, and we're not in charge of the RFP or the development. We're
Okay.
a supportive role.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts for the commissioners check-in?
I'm all set.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
I'll second.
Discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.